Hello, friends, and welcome back to another set of malicious compliance stories. Today's story comes straight from an IT department where one guy decided that teamwork means everyone else should do his work for him. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. IT guy versus the professional complainer. This happened yesterday while I, male 24, was working from home. I work in the IT department for a medium-sized company. We're a small team, just 5 of us, and most days we handle everything from password resets to hardware shipments. Yesterday, 2 of my colleagues were in the office, Mark and Eric. Mark's a solid guy, reliable and easy to work with. Eric's the type of coworker who somehow manages to make every small inconvenience everyone else's problem. Anyway, around mid-morning, I got a support ticket through our system requesting 4 docking stations for a few new hires. Normally, I'd handle it myself, but since I wasn't in the office, I pinged Mark over Teams. "Hey man," I typed, "could you grab 4 docks from the storage room and get them shipped out via Perolator? Just send me the pin once it's done." Mark replied right away with his usual chill attitude, "No problem, I'll take care of it after lunch." A while later, I get a Teams message from him that just says, "You'll never believe what just happened." Apparently, while he was boxing up the docks, Eric, who sits right across from him, noticed what he was doing. "Eric, hey, are you shipping something out?" Mark, "Yeah, OP needed some docks sent to one of the remote offices." Eric, "Cool, can you send something for me too while you're at it?" Now for context, we all went through the same training. Everyone on our team has their own Perolator account, packing supplies and instructions for how to ship company equipment. It's literally part of our onboarding, so this wasn't a case of Eric not knowing how, he just didn't want to do it. Mark, being polite but firm, said, "Sorry man, I've already got my hands full with this. You'll have to send your own." You'd think that would have been the end of it, but no. Eric apparently went back to his desk, visibly annoyed, sighing dramatically, muttering under his breath, the whole performance. Then a minute later, he notices the shipping label Mark was printing and realizes the ticket number belonged to me. That's when he got up again. "Eric, wait a minute, you're doing OP shipping for him but not mine? How's that fair?" Mark, "Because OP's working from home. He doesn't have the docks or any packing stuff. You're literally sitting 10 feet from the shipping room." Eric, "That's not the point. We're supposed to be a team." Mark just stared at him. "Yeah, and being a team doesn't mean I do your job for you. You've got the same account I do. You can send your own package." That apparently broke Eric's brain. He launched into a mini rant about how Mark was playing favorites and how this was creating a toxic work environment. He even threatened to go to our boss, who, by the way, was off-site that day, and would have told him to stop wasting everyone's time. Mark said he just shrugged and went back to taping up the box. "Go ahead, man, knock yourself out." After that, Eric sulked for the rest of the day, didn't ship his stuff, didn't do any real work. Mark said he spent hours just scrolling through TikTok and clicking between tabs every time someone walked by pretending to look busy. When I heard the story, I couldn't stop laughing. Eric could have literally solved his problem in less time than he spent whining about it. He made such a big deal about teamwork, but when it came down to it, the only person not pulling his weight was him. This morning, I checked the ticket queue. The docks Mark shipped are already delivered, and Eric's package still sitting on his desk unboxed. I love how you went from lazy to victim in record time. "You're creating a toxic work environment." Dude, the only thing toxic is your attitude and probably the smell of those docks collecting dust on your desk. And the irony, he whined about teamwork while doing absolutely nothing the rest of the day. And our second story. A customer waits for service despite an obvious medical emergency. When I, 29-year-old female, first started at my current job a few years ago, I worked the front counter at a small convenience store. It was a pretty typical gig: morning regulators, grabbing coffee and cigarettes, people picking up newspapers, the usual chatter and routine. I'd been there long enough to know most customers by name, and I liked the predictability of it. That morning, though, went from normal to terrifying in the span of a few seconds. Not that I remember it. I was restocking the cigarette wall behind the counter. Next thing I knew, there were paramedics crouched in front of me trying to talk to me gently, asking if I knew where I was. I felt like I'd blinked and the whole world had changed. I didn't know how I'd gotten there. I didn't understand why everyone looked so panicked. My manager was standing nearby, pale as a ghost. One of the cashiers was crying, and I just kept insisting that I was fine. I distinctly remember trying to ring up this woman who had a newspaper in her hand. She looked mildly annoyed, like she'd been waiting too long, but she wasn't scared. It was surreal. Everyone else was just freaking out, but she looked at me like I just inconvenienced her. The paramedics were trying to convince me to go with them, and I remember telling them they must have the wrong person because I was perfectly fine. But then I touched the side of my head and felt this huge lump forming, apparently from when I fell backward and hit the metal shelving. That's when I started to realize maybe something really had happened. Fast forward to after my hospital stay, I was diagnosed with epilepsy, something I'd never had any history of. My neurologist wanted to see if there was security footage of the incident to help determine what kind of seizure I'd had and how long it lasted. So a few days later, I sat in the office with my boss watching the recording on his computer. It was horrifying. There I was on the screen, standing behind the counter, restocking cigarettes, and then suddenly I dropped like a marionette with its strings cut. No warning, no stumble, just down. My whole body started convulsing violently on the floor. It went on for 3 long minutes. And the woman with the newspaper, she was still standing there at the counter. She didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't call for help. She just stood there waiting, arms crossed like she was in line at the DMV. At one point, she even glanced at her watch. In fairness, I understand there's not much a bystander can do during a seizure other than protect someone's head and make sure they don't choke. But the sheer lack of reaction, like it wasn't even registering that a person was having a medical emergency right in front of her, completely floored me. Eventually, another customer came into frame, realized what was happening, and shouted for help. That's when the panic started. People ran over, and my coworkers called 911. But through it all, that woman just stayed there, still holding her newspaper. My boss looked as uncomfortable watching the footage as I felt. I think we both sat there for a few seconds afterward, silent. Even now, years later, I can't shake how bizarre it was. I know people freeze in strange situations, but this wasn't shock. She looked irritated, like I was somehow wasting her time by collapsing behind the counter. Every time I think about it, I get the same hollow feeling in my stomach. It's one thing to know that bad things can happen suddenly. It's another to realize someone could just watch you nearly die and still just wait to pay for their paper. Okay, hold on. You're telling me this woman stood there for 3 whole minutes while you were literally having a seizure on the floor? And her main concern was a newspaper? 3 minutes doesn't seem like long until you count it out. Honestly, that footage must have been surreal to watch. Like seeing your own near-death moment and realizing someone else thought it was just bad customer service. And our next story. I bought my sister out to save her. Now she wants the property and the money. I, 32-year-old female, inherited an apartment with my older sister, Claire, 35-year-old female, when our grandmother passed away. We each owned 50-50. It wasn't a glamorous place, a bit run down, bad side of town, but it was ours. For a few years, we just rented it out, split the maintenance costs, and pocketed the rent. Then, when I was 28, Claire hit a rough patch, and by rough, I mean serious financial trouble. Maxed out credit cards, overdue bills, barely scraping by. I helped her as much as I could, but I couldn't be her personal ATM forever. She couldn't get a loan because her credit score was in the gutter, and she was desperate. Finally, I suggested a solution. I'd buy her half of the apartment from her outright, at market value. She'd get a nice cash infusion, get rid of a financial responsibility, and I'd get full ownership. It took some negotiating, but she agreed. I paid her what was fair, actually a bit above what her realtor told me I'd need to, and she used that money to pay off most of her debt and get her head above water. For 4 years, everything was fine. Then the neighborhood changed. The city started investing in the area, new school programs, upgraded parks, improved policing. Crime rates dropped, small businesses moved in, and suddenly our dingy little apartment was worth a lot more than it had been when I bought her out. That's when the trouble started. One night, over dinner, Claire casually dropped this gem. "You know, it's not fair that you're making so much money off Grandma's apartment. I think you should pay me half the rent you collect from tenants." I blinked. "Half the rent? Claire, I bought your half. You don't own it anymore. You got paid for your share years ago." "Yeah," she said, sipping her wine, "but I didn't know the neighborhood was going to turn around like this. If I had, I never would have sold. You should at least split the rent with me. Or better yet, just let me buy back my half at the price I sold it for. That's fair. I actually laughed. You want to buy back half an apartment at the 2019 price? Claire, do you hear yourself? That's not how real estate works. She crossed her arms. You wouldn't even have this apartment if it weren't for me. Grandma left it to both of us. I only sold because I was struggling. It's not fair that you're the only one benefiting from it now. You weren't struggling because of me, I snapped. I helped you. I paid you a fair price when the market wasn't great. I saved you from bankruptcy. You signed the papers, you cashed the check. You don't get to demand money now just because things turned around. Things escalated after that dinner. She started sending me texts demanding that I make things right. My parents got dragged in and started telling me to be the bigger person and keep the peace. I refused, politely at first, then less politely when she kept pushing. A few weeks ago, she sent me an actual letter. Who does that anymore? From some random online mediation service threatening to take me to court if I didn't agree to her demands. I called my lawyer. He laughed and said, she doesn't have a legal leg to stand on. You bought her out. The property's yours. End of story. So I decided to hit back, but by the book. I had my lawyer send her a formal cease and desist letter telling her to stop harassing me about a property she no longer owns. And I told my parents very clearly that if they kept pressuring me to hand over money, I'd happily send them a copy of the paperwork showing the buyout was fair, legal, and final. The fallout was spectacular. Claire blew up my phone with texts calling me greedy, heartless, and a bad sister. She even showed up at my apartment building once demanding to be let in to see her property. The building manager called me and I told him she doesn't own anything here. If she comes back, treat her like any other trespasser. A week later, I got an email from her saying she was done with me. Fine by me. The tenants pay their rent on time, the neighborhood is thriving, and I've already started using the extra money to renovate the kitchen and raise the value even more. And Claire? She's still renting a tiny little flat across town, complaining about how expensive everything is. Every time she texts one of our cousins to whine about how I stole her inheritance, I just smile and check my bank account. Funny thing about property, it tends to reward the person who actually owns it. The real tragedy here is the damage to your relationship with your sister. However, that damage is a consequence of her actions, not yours. You offered a solution during her crisis, she accepted it. Her current sense of entitlement does not change the facts of that transaction. And our last story. Entitled neighbor thought my electricity was his to use, then had the audacity to complain when I stopped him. I moved into this 2-bedroom apartment a couple of months ago, thinking it was the perfect place. Quiet, affordable, with a shared basement that was split evenly between me and my neighbor. The lease even mentioned the division. His side, my side, easy enough. Or so I thought. About 12 days ago, my microwave tripped a breaker. No big deal, right? I went downstairs with a flashlight to flip it back on. That's when I noticed something weird. Running neatly along the ceiling, zip-tied in place, was an extension cord leading straight from my outlet into his side of the basement. And at the source, a light socket to plug converter jammed into one of my fixtures. He'd literally wired himself into my electricity. My first reaction was disbelief. My neighbor, who always smiled, waved, and talked about his tight budget, had been sneaking power from my side this whole time. I went straight to his door. He answered, looking nervous, and when I told him he was stealing my power, he instantly blamed a friend who must have done it as a joke. Sure, buddy, I told him I'd unplugged it, was putting a lock on my side, and that the landlord would hear about it. I called the landlord right away, and he actually called back within the hour. He agreed I could add a lock and said we'd deal with the issue Monday morning. It was Friday, so I figured, fine, I'll wait. Then I opened my electric bill. Last month was $80, already higher than normal, but this month, $130, and I live alone. I barely even use my oven. Suddenly, everything made sense. He'd probably been doing this from day one, quietly running his lights, fridge, maybe even a heater off my line. Still, I chalked it up as a loss. I paid the bill, locked my side of the basement, and tried to move on. Until today. I went down to grab something from storage and froze. There was another cord, a new one, zip-tied in a different place and running through a narrow gap near the top of the wall that divided our basements. I could actually see where he'd fed it through. The audacity was unbelievable. This time I didn't knock. I called the landlord again. He sighed and told me to call the police, that having an official report would make it easier to evict him. So I did. The officer showed up, listened patiently, and when I showed him the hot extension cord, his expression changed. He said this wasn't just theft, it was a fire hazard waiting to happen. He took my information, wrote up a report, and told me to file a records request at the station the next day so my landlord could use it for eviction. I yanked the cord out, took the converter too, and made sure my door was reinforced this time. I even added a motion camera at the basement entrance. But I couldn't relax. Every time I heard a thump or creak below, I imagined him sneaking back down to rig up another line. 2 weeks later, things finally came to a head. My landlord called early one morning saying he'd gotten a complaint from my neighbor. Apparently I'd cut off their power. My landlord told him point blank, "You don't even have access to their electricity." Then, mid-call, the lights in the neighbor's apartment went out. Turns out the electric company had been investigating too. When the police forwarded their report, they discovered my neighbor hadn't had a valid electric account in months. He'd been illegally bypassing power, not just from me, but from the building's main line before moving to my outlet. The landlord showed up with maintenance and the cops that afternoon. They found scorch marks on his wall outlets, melted plugs, and a string of unsafe wiring that looked like a fire marshal's worst nightmare. The officers made him pack his stuff on the spot. The landlord changed his locks that same day. A week later, I got an update from the landlord. He'd been fined for illegal tampering with the electrical system and utility theft. Word was he might even face criminal charges for breaking and entering. The electric company confirmed I'd be refunded for the months of overcharges once they adjusted my account. This is exactly why I don't trust quiet neighbors. They're either secretly running a crypto mine or making human jerky in the basement. Like, how bold do you have to be to zip tie your theft to the ceiling? That's not sneaky, that's a DIY crime museum exhibit. And the whole, "my friend must have done it as a joke"? Yeah, sure, because everyone's got that one prankster buddy who breaks into basements and hot wires power lines for laughs. Totally normal. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.